Greetings. Welcome to the Vedic Perspective. I'm your host, Ralph Lorino, and we're broadcasting live today from the Protect-A-Cow Farm Sanctuary in Port Royal, Pennsylvania. It's Saturday, December 11th, 2010, and I'd like to thank you for listening, whether you're listening live or whether you'll be listening later in the archive. As we've discussed previously, there's a lot of alternative communities right now, alternative research, alternative history, and I feel like that the purpose and the reason for looking into alternative knowledge has been forgotten. So I'd like to give you the Vedic perspective purpose as to why we're here today, why we're going to be delving into ancient knowledge and ancient scriptural texts in the Vedic wisdom system. The Vedic civilization's destination is to go back to Godhead, back home, where there is no birth, no death, no old age, and no disease. The Vedas direct everyone not to remain in the darkness of the material world, but to go towards the light of the spiritual kingdom, far beyond the material sky. So that's the purpose, and that's the reason why we're here today. It's a very important purpose. It's the most important purpose in the entire world, and I think that this is the only show that's bringing forth this kind of purpose and this kind of knowledge. I feel that the alternative research community is already fallen into a dilapidated condition. There's a lot of people giving information. A lot of it's false. Some of it's real. But even if it's real, there's no context being given to it in order to help people elevate themselves. It's just more of a kind of being bombarded by a bunch of facts and figures and alternative reasoning, and that there's no one is giving any backup or citing where the knowledge is coming from, or if it's their knowledge, whether they got it, how they got it, was it in some kind of drug-induced stupor, or was it while they were intoxicated, or are they getting it from an ancient wisdom system? Everyone seems to want to try to take credit for the knowledge themselves. Therefore, it's suspect because, as we've discussed in previous shows, there are two types of knowledge. One type is descending, and one type is ascending. The ascending message can also be called the inductive method. This is most commonly known by the scientific theory, where through observations, people make theories about what is going on in the natural world or in the cosmological situation. Then, once they've proposed a theory, they look for evidence to support that theory, and through observation. Once they gather enough observational evidence, they try to perform experiments to prove the theory. And then, if the theory can be repeatable, if the experiments are repeatable, then the knowledge tends to be, or the information tends to become what they would call a law within the scientific community. Then this process of gaining knowledge has a lot of difficulties because the nature of the living entities are that there's four problems that we have in terms of gathering knowledge. The first is that we tend to commit mistakes. The second is that we tend to become illusioned. The third is that we have the tendency to cheat and to cheat others. And the fourth is that we are limited by imperfect senses. And I've given some examples of that in the past. For example, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, whereby he showed that it takes some time for light to bounce off whatever it is we're perceiving, and then to reach the receptacle, then to be processed. So in essence, we can never actually observe reality as it's happening. Or in a more simple example, that when we close our eyes, we can't even see the eyelid, which is the closest thing to the eye, because of the lack of light coming into the eye. Also, we know from so many other facts and figures that there are so many spectrums of light that our senses cannot perceive, and no matter what we create, what kind of sensors we create, we can never get the full picture of reality as to what's going on in the world around us. So those are four very big problems that we have. Also, There are other problems which scientists have looked at before. For example, there's he's not exactly a scientist, rather he's a philosopher of science, is Karl Popper. And he was a great critic of the inductive method of which we're speaking, whereby there are theories formed, then observational data and experimentation come forth. His proposal was that because of the nature of human beings, we tend to, even if a theory has been proven false, that we tend to stick with that theory for a long time and try to make adjustments to the theory rather than just completely scrapping it altogether and starting over with new data. So that is one problem why it takes so long within science for theories to change. For example, for a long time, they believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then after a very long debate and after a very long time, then came to be that the sun was the center. And actually, if we look at the bottom line now, although people want to hold on to the idea that the Earth is the center, according to Einstein and the theory of relativity, whether we say the Earth is the center, or whether we say the sun is the center, or we pick some random point out in the middle of space somewhere and say it's the center, all the same physical laws apply. Of course, the orbits are going to be drawn in a different way of how everything is moving, but there's no greater validity to say that the sun is the center, or the Earth is the center, or some random point out in space is the center. That all the exact same physical laws apply. And even in some of Einstein's famous paradoxes, he pointed out that if two trains are moving at exactly the same speed, all the same physical laws applies, whether you want to look at it that the two trains are moving together at the same exact speed, or whether the entire universe is moving past them while they stand still. All the same exact laws would apply, no matter which way you looked at the situation. That everything is moving past them while they stand still, or that they're moving together, which is the more common, as we perceive with our senses, viewpoint. So this is also another problem, that as much as the scientists have a problem in moving their thoughts and realities on certain situations and theories, by the time it filters down to the general public, I mean, we've had the theory of special relativity and relativity for almost 100 years now. And I think that most of the implications of it still aren't really very well understood by the common man or the layman. So as difficult it is for scientists to change their mind, by the time that change filters down to the ordinary people and they understand the new ideas on the nature of reality, that takes even a much more extremely long time. So Popper's idea in his philosophy of science is that the inductive method is fraught with many, many difficulties, and the primary which being that most theories that are put forth are not able to be proven false. So therefore, they are not exactly scientific theories, more they're kind of a metaphysical worldview that is being couched in the terms of science. Let's take the theory of evolution, for example. It is impossible to prove the theory of evolution to be false because it's happened so long ago, everything's already said and done, and there's no way that we could go back into time and to show exactly what happened. So Popper's argument is that is not a scientific theory because it can never be proven to be false. Also, let's take a look at the Big Bang. Again, something that's happened in the incredibly far distant past. There's no way that anyone would ever know exactly what happened or how it came into being. And Popper would again point out that this is a theory that can never be proven to be false, so therefore it's not exactly a scientific theory. It's more of a metaphysical outlook that is, or a creation mythology that is being couched in scientific terms. Also, one of the problems he found is that even the few genuinely testable theories out there, when found to be false, are still upheld by their admirers. For example, by introducing ad hoc some auxiliary assumption or by reinterpreting the theory ad hoc in such a way that it escapes refutation. Such a procedure is always possible, but it rescues the theory from refutation only at the price of destroying or at least lowering its scientific status. So we see this very, very much in modern physics and modern astronomy, that often theories are proven to be false, but because it has become the established dogma, that they try to tinker with the theory and add different formulas or different constants, or in some way or other try to hold on at any cost to that theory, because it's gone beyond the scientific theory. It's become more of a religious dogma. And just as people will cite that people in different religions hold on to their dogma despite whatever facts or reason have been put before them, the same thing is happening in the scientific community. For example, in the theory of relativity, Einstein's equations clearly showed that the universe should be expanding. But as a philosophy, Einstein could not accept that. He wanted to believe that the universe was in a steady state and that it was not expanding, neither contracting, despite what his own equations showed. So he had what was called a universal constant, or a cosmological constant, to the equation, which is just a constant that he more or less made up so that the equations would work out to be that everything was in a steady state. Now, of course, over time, other scientists pointed out to him the flaws in what he was doing, and that there was inescapable that his original equations without the constant pointed towards an expanding universe, and through mathematical arguments and scientific equations, this is how we got to the point in the last 100 years of the Big Bang becoming the established dogma, because it was impossible to escape in Einstein's own equations, even though he couldn't face up to it, that the universe should be expanding according to his theories. And it took some time, even for the person who came up with the theory himself, to be able to accept that. And it was only after some 20 or 30 years of other scientists proving him wrong, and that the constant that he had added into the equations was more or less just a fudge factor, that he was able to agree with them. So in that regard, those are some of the problems of the inductive method of reasoning, and I've covered a few of them. The bottom line is that most what's proposed as scientific theories aren't actually scientific to begin with, and even if they are, due to the various inequities within our sense perception, etc., the four defects of committing mistakes, becoming illusion, cheating and cheating others, and limited imperfect senses, that we tend to make mistakes, even though a theory may actually be scientific. The few that are scientific, in the sense that they can be proven to be false. So that brings us to the ascending process of knowledge, which, or excuse me, rather the descending process of knowledge, which is that we hear from authority. For example, I've given the example before that by the inductive method, it is very difficult for me to determine who my father is, in the sense that there are a million of men out there, billions, and if I had no idea who it was, there's really no way for me to go about finding out. Nowadays, they can point out, well, we have DNA testing, this and that, but to test all the men in the entire world's DNA to find the match as to who is my father is completely impractical. But if I just hear from the authority, my mother, then the knowledge, if the source of the knowledge is reliable, then I can save so much time and so much effort of the inductive method, and that I can know the truth very quickly, as long as the source of the knowledge is reliable. So we have to understand that the inductive method is fraught with difficulties. It also usually ends up being a type of dogma, and that the deductive method in many situations is preferable, because as long as the source of the knowledge is reliable, it can save us so much time and effort and wasting our valuable time as to what the ultimate nature of reality is. So of course, here on the Vedic perspective, we're putting forth that the knowledge of the Vedas are reliable in terms of what is the purpose of life, what is the nature of reality, what is the nature of the cosmological situation,